Today I want to show anyone who is interested on how to turn your personal block into a hoodie block. And the first thing you have to do with a personal block is to center the side seams, because you often with a personal block have your front that's wider than your back. So the first thing we're going to do is center the side seams, and then we turn it into a dartless block, and then we make our hoodie block, and that is what we are going to do today. So
this is how you center your side seam on your personal block, because when you draft a personal block, oftentimes the front block ends up being larger than the back block, and this is because of the bust measurements. But for these next two blocks we are making, we want this side seam centered, because that's what the books tell us to do. So what we do is we measure from the point at the very bottom of your arm side all the way to the center back, and that bottom arm side point all the way to the center front. And we are going to take these measurements and we figure out the difference, and then you divide that difference in half. And we are going to be adding it to our smaller block, the back block, and we're going to be subtracting it from the larger block, which is our front block. Now, I like to work on banner paper just because I can get it often on sale from office supply stores after like the back to school is like all over and they have like their school supplies on sale. But I also like to use like the brown Amazon paper that comes in packages. I know lots of people like to do wrapping paper. I personally have never had a wrapping paper that didn't tear when you look at it and wasn't horrible to write on and even worse to try to erase on. But wrapping paper isn't recyclable, and I would much rather go through a ton of paper that is completely recyclable so that I can buy recycled paper as opposed to just throwing it all into the trash. But if it's easier to work on, it makes sense. But I have this cardboard, it is like, they call it a cutting table, but it's not for rotary cutting, it's for cutting with your scissors. And it is cardboard, and it is great for sewing, it's great for pattern drafting. I have mine secondhand, so it's not the cleanest looking, but secondhand's even better because I saved it from the landfill. So after you have your paper that you're going to be drafting on, I am starting with my back block, and I am just tracing it off just to the waist because this is what I want to be working with. I don't need a block that goes down to the hip for what I plan on doing. So I just use my L square, and I can kind of see the lines of my cardboard cutting mat through the white paper, although you can't see it very well online. And I use my ruler to make sure that everything is nice and straight, and the lines I can see through the paper help me to do this. And I trace my block out. I'm tracing some of it out in paper because this is the line I'm going to move. And you have to be sure also to mark in all your darts. Now there is a dart at the shoulder, and then there's like your center dart. And then I trace out my back. I think I trace it out in marker. And what I do to add the extra to the side seam is that I measure out how far it needs to be, and I just slide my block over and retrace the side seam to add in the whatever my difference was, halved, add it to the back. So I just move my block over and trace it out again. And I do this with the front block kind of in the opposite way. I trace my front block out and I mark in all my darts and all my markings. But instead of sliding it out to add the difference, I slide the side seam in the difference to subtract it, and then I retrace that side seam. So instead of like marking a line through the whole thing, I just slide the cardboard over, and I find this is the easiest way to add and subtract to your side seams when it comes to doing your blocks. Now that we have our side seam centered and our back bodice block traced out, I'm going to show you where we move the darts. Now we cut out that little shoulder dart and we move it into the arm side. And you get some spare paper and just put it under the entire arm side, because we are going to add 0.5 of a centimeter to it. And this is 0.197 of an inch. I don't know inches. I had to look the conversion up online, and this is what it told me. But feel free to comment down bottom how someone that uses inches would call it, if that makes sense. So now, starting at the bottom of the new dart placement, this is where we're going to add the 0.5 of a centimeter to the bottom half of that arm side. But now at the underarm point, we're not going to raise or lower that. We're going to keep that where it is, and we're going to draw a straight line to keep it square. You don't want to create a new line that curves up, because this would create a peak when you cut it out. So you just want to keep that nice and flat. And then you were going to take your curved ruler and match, sort of not entirely connecting the dots, but sort of matching and blending the new dots that or markings you've created for the extra 0.5 of a centimeter from that original underarm point up until the shoulder point, sort of blending and smoothing it out. And I just like to move my ruler around and sort of get the best shape that you can while you're working it out. It takes me longer to show this than it does for me to talk about it, I guess. But you can kind of just see how I just kind of wiggle the ruler around and find the best place to really get the shape of an arm side I want. And we're using the original shoulder point and the original underarm point. We're just blending in that new added allowance that we created. And I realize my ruler here is broken in half. It's my favorite ruler, and they don't make them anymore. And mine got busted in my suitcase like a really long time ago. So I guess maybe I could look on eBay or Etsy for it, and someday I probably will, but it's pretty convenient having it in half anyway. So one half is the back armhole and one half is the front armhole. And I just like it better than your regular French curves when it comes to this line. But I just cut it all out, and then I try to give you a clear picture of what this looks like in the Here I am working with the front block. Now the first thing I like to do when I'm working with my blocks is to draw a nice straight line to be my starting point. So I'll line up my center front to that line and make sure that my waistline is squared to this line. It's important to keep these lines squared for when you're working with your pattern drafting and your fabrics, to make sure the grain of your fabric is going like the direction you want. And you need to transfer all your important markings. So here I just dot out the dart points, and it's a basic block, so there's not very many markings you need to transfer, but I have my armhole notch, and I have the tops and bottoms of the dart legs, and just follow the rest of the outline with your pencil. Here I'm using a Sharpie. I think I need to switch to a thicker Sharpie. I don't think it's as visible as I would like it to be. I do draw in the side seam with a pencil because I am going to be moving the side seam. I have not centered this side seam yet for the front block. So the first thing I do is to move the side seam. Now in the back where I added the measurement, in the front I am going to subtract it. But first I trace in my bust dart, and this is the dart that we're going to be working with to create our dartless block for our leisurely looser fit wear. You do leave in the waist dart, although I can't remember if I actually draw it in or not, so we'll see if that happens. And here I measure how much I need to bring in the side seam, and I'm just using a seam gauge to sort of put little dashes how much I need to move it in. But I actually measured it wrong, so I have to go back and do this again because my measurement was set to something different. I must have used my seam gauge and didn't realize, but when I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, that's not enough. So here I see my mistake and I go dash in how much I need to subtract from this front block. One, two, three, four little dashes, probably more than I need it. And I just sort of adjust my block to kind of make it fit the new line, and trying to keep the shape that I needed for the side seam as close to what it originally was. So I'm really looking at that underarm point when I'm maneuvering this cardboard manila paper around, and I draw in my new side seam. And I want to keep that point parallel to the waistline. You want to keep your underarm point, that bottom of your arm side, nice and parallel to your waistline because you don't want any peaks or divots in that area. I do kind of label this front dartless block, although like I said, technically there is still the waist dart. I just didn't draw it in because I'm not using this block to do a different design. I'm going to be using this block to create the hoodie block. And I know when I'm working with the hoodie block that I'm not manipulating that dart. So going forward, I don't need it. But if I was going to use this block to design some pajamas or some chemises or something else, I would want those darts drawn in. I'm just lazy. So I cut it out with my paper scissors. I personally think it's important to have paper scissors and fabric scissors. I know some people are like, man, they all get dull anyway, but I can replace paper scissors less expensively than fabric scissors. And depending on where you live, it can be really hard to find a place that will sharpen them. And it'll be hard to even find a place that you can nail your scissors to that will sharpen them. So I like to keep mine separate. Now, this block does not include seam allowance, and I'm cutting it all out on the lines. I'm not including seam allowance before I cut it out. And this is just a personal preference for how I like to work with blocks. I like to add the seam allowance with how much and where when I feel like it. Does that make sense? Maybe not. So because this is a block, when I cut it out of my fabric, I'm not adding seam allowance to the neckline or to the armhole or to the waistline. I'm only adding it to the shoulder seam and to the side seams. So here you can see I am beginning to work with the bust dart. Now we are putting this bust dart into our armscye, and we're going to draw a line basically to where we notch our armscye, and that is where we are going to be putting this dart fullness. And it's kind of like connect the dots. You just, your dart end to your armpit line, and you connect the dots. You slice it open and you close up your bust dart and you tape it down. I really need to learn how to speed things up after I record them. So here I am finally taping that bust dart closed, and it is now into the armscye. That top part that is now sticking out over the shoulder line, we are just cutting that off later. But we need to get some paper to put underneath our armscye because this is where we're making the next change. So I just, again, tape it down because you don't want your paper moving while you're trying to work with it. And here we are going to be working with the armscye. And what we're going to do after we get it taped down is on that bottom dart leg, we are going to measure in 2 centimeters. So the conversion for that is 0.787 of an inch. Please comment. I watch enough people sewing online to know that's not how they talk about inches, so it doesn't sound right to me, but I don't know what the right way is. So please comment and share what you would call that if you work with inches. So after I mark that in, I know that is how much I am taking out of my armscye. Now I mark that bottom armscye to keep it nice and parallel to my waistline. So I'm just making that nice and flat and like straight, parallel to your waistline. And I just move my curved ruler around until I find an angle that I think fits and looks the way it's supposed to. Now I know that's not helpful, but if you really look at a lot of armscye holes, it'll be very easy. It'll just pop out at you the way it is supposed to look. So then I'm just blending this up through the armscye to the original shoulder point. We're not moving the shoulder point in, we're leaving the shoulder point where it is. And we're just blending in that new line to the underarm point, the bottom of your armscye. And then we can tape it down, and I believe the next thing we need to do is just cut that bad boy out. Did I really just say that? Oh my God, I'm so weird. Okay, so we cut out our new armscye line, and this is our front dartless block that we'll be working with to make the hoodie block. Now this video is quite long. I did film in time lapse, but either I'm extremely slow or that setting for time lapse is just like real time with no volume. Like I don't understand why when I film in time lapse this seems so slow, but I'll get there. I'll find the one that's not too fast and not too slow. But here it is, and I flip it over and just tape down all the extra pieces. Now, I think I was originally going to release this in one video on how to take this dartless block and turn it into our hoodie block, but I feel like this is already very long, and
this video is long and I still have a lot of voiceover to do for the second part, so I thought I would just divide it into 2 parts. So far we have taken our basic block and we have turned it into our dartless block, which still has a dart in the bottom, but we manipulated the bust dart and the arm side. And next we are taking this and we'll be making our hoodie block. So I'll see you next week, hopefully. Thanks for watching.